I've heard people state that my pastor said that this particular scientific discovery disproves the entire theory of evolution. Now, I'm a skeptic of the evolutionary paradigm, and I like it if there are discoveries that challenge the theory of evolution, but it seems to me that there's something going on here that I'm not real comfortable with. Mark, as a philosopher, help me with this.
Well, you probably should be uncomfortable with it, because unless you know that the pastor is a scientist, he's making a scientific claim. And the problem with that is not the scientific claim shouldn't be made, but a scientific claim that broad, that extraordinary, needs to be made by somebody who's well entrenched and well trained in that particular science. So in this case, this is the fallacy of appeal to unqualified authority. If we're presuming that the pastor is only a pastor and a theologian, then transferring their expertise and authority in theology to a branch of science that they have never been trained in is illegitimate. And the reason it feels so uncomfortable is that it should be, because the person does not have the authority to talk and to make the claim, especially when that extraordinary, that he was making.
Okay, so Ken, you're a philosopher as well. What do we do when we suspect that somebody is engaged in this particular fallacy, and how can we avoid this fallacy ourselves?
Well, if the person is speaking outside their field, as Mark said, then they're an unqualified authority. They don't have the expertise to be able to make a declaration that's really going to support it. I think it's also important, though, to realize that the merits of the argument they may be able to stand on their own, but that authoritative voice that could come behind it gives it even better support. I think the key, Fuzz, is quoting the best people in the field, making sure your arguments are strong, and appealing to the right people with the right classifications.
So the pastor, let's say in this case, could have made that statement, but if he made that statement and he buttressed it by citing an authority in, let's say, evolutionary biology, then it would be okay to point that out in an argument.
Yeah, and I think there you would have somebody who's coming alongside who really is a specialist in that field and is giving support for the argument. That would be a lot better way of approaching it.
Okay, so Mark, another question that comes to mind. Is it possible that somebody could be genuinely an authority in an area but arrive at the wrong conclusion? And if we suspect that's going on, how do we handle that?
There are a couple of ways of doing it. First, if when you're evaluating their argument, there's a logical defect, you can point out the logical defect. Another way of doing it is if you're sufficiently expert yourself in the field and you can challenge the content. For example, he's making a factual claim that's false. You could challenge that directly. But let's say that you're not. Let's say that the expert is an expert in something that you're not an expert in, but you know of somebody else who has a contrary view. One effective way of dealing with that is to say, this other person says this, and they also have a doctorate degree in biochemistry, and this is what they say about the claim. Could you please explain to me how you would answer that? That's a reasonable way of approaching it as well.